Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Weird Techniques of Misinformation webinar here at the Global Game Jam. I'm Jess Rowley, and I'm the Events and Program Manager here. We have a fantastic hour for you as we're joined by Julian Neylan. Julian has an expertise in media literacy around misinformation. He's also an award-winning educational games designer, having worked with organizations like the UN, the WHO, and NATO. He currently works with the DISARM Foundation on identifying misinformation tactics, techniques, and procedures. Today, we'll be talking about ways that misinformation runs prevalent in our news and media. And this webinar is part of a series leading up to Ctrl++DIsinfo, which is a multi-stage international jam geared towards creating high-quality, engaging video games focused on teaching media literacy and critical thinking to increase skepticism and propaganda and disinformation. A little bit about what Ctrl++DIsinfo is. It's a 27-country initiative that is part of a 2-year United with Ukraine Games project, which seeks to train 2,500 game developers, launch 30 impactful games, tackling the topic of disinformation from around the world, and reach a public audience of over 70,000. During the lead up to Ctrl++DIsinfo kicking off in January, we'll be rolling out educational resources and webinars, such as this one, led by experts to help jammers build foundational knowledge around disinformation, serious games, and more. Before we start, just a few housekeeping. We are recording this, so you will be able to review this after the presentation. We will have a chat, so if you have any questions, please drop your questions in the chat. We will be monitoring during the presentation, and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A at the end that I will be moderating. So without further ado, let's kick this off. Julian, yeah, if you want to
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Of course. Thanks for having me. And thanks for everybody who's joining us. So yeah, as Jess told you all, so I worked in developing media literacy games. Now I work with an organization that works on identifying tactics and techniques in disinformation. So I will speak to a little bit of how I've seen educational games handle disinformation in the past. And then I will go through a series of techniques that I think would be interesting for you to know about, so that you can maybe incorporate them into your games. Because there is a lot that has been covered by disinformation games so far, but there are definitely areas that have not been covered. And if they have been covered already, it doesn't mean they've already been covered in every language or for every context. So yeah, so first we'll start off with what is disinformation. So the generally accepted definition is information that is deliberately false or misleading and intended to deceive. So deliberately false and intended to deceive means that they are lying and they know that they're lying. So that intention piece is important, where misinformation is information whose false or misleading nature is unknown to those who are spreading it. So there's a slight difference there, but that difference can be very important when we're talking about it, because, you know, you might have a relative who sees that, you know, eating carrots will make you orange. That would be like misinformation if they spread it, because they don't know that that's a lie, versus the person who originally wrote the article of eating carrots will make you orange. They're trying to mess with people. They're trying to spread falsehood. So another thing we talk about is information manipulation. So with disinformation and misinformation, it can get very political very fast. Because oftentimes when we talk about this, if someone says, oh, that's disinformation, it often means that what they're saying is false or they disagree with it. But, you know, what is true or false is one of the most important questions in any society. And determining that takes a lot of effort in most cases. So we often talk about information manipulation as these are like concrete techniques that are used to spread falsehood. So for example, a deep fake video, right? So, if I tell you that the sky is purple, that's false, and I'm intending to deceive it. If I send you a deepfake video of the sky being purple, um, I'm trying to use technology to make my point clearer. It's a lot more believable if you can see the sky being purple than if I just tell you, hey, the sky is purple. So with a lot of what we see online, it's more that information manipulation. That can be the creation of, hundreds of fake accounts to like something and make it appear really popular. That can be things like deep fakes or AI audio. So that's more what we're talking about with information manipulation, and an influence operation is a coordinated information manipulation operations executed by threat actors to influence perceptions through the techniques. So they're trying to use information manipulation to influence perceptions or just how people view the world. Um, so as I have with the sky is purple example, if I set up 500 fake accounts and they all post similar stories about the sky being purple, um, if those don't have any following, right? If I set up 500 fake accounts, nobody likes them. These are just fake people. Like when you add somebody on social media, you've probably already known them. So if I set up a number of fake accounts, a couple of things that would be done, and this is from the perspective of the people who spread disinformation, this is what they do. They will try to look like real people. So they will try to establish themselves as having like hobbies or interests or um, coming from, real places. And so that grounds them as real people somewhat, that additional information. And then they will interact with each other and like and comment on each other's things. That pattern of behavior makes them look a bit more real. And then they will try to interact with real people um, to spread their message. And that might not always be spreading the message immediately. Sometimes they may just try to develop a relationship through a shared interest. So, if there's a group of people who like tennis, they'll go into that group, talk about tennis for a bit, and then say, "Oh yeah, this match was interesting because in the background you can see the sky is purple." Then the disinformation comes in. So this sort of coordination, these different steps that are executed, um, that is sort of more the realm that I deal with, where it's not just the telling of the lie, it's everything around the lie that they're trying to do to make it more believable. So that's an influence operation, and we'll go through some examples so that this becomes a bit clear. But we see this a lot when we analyze disinformation campaigns in terms of what they do, and how they try to make their lies believable. So most games so far have covered a handful of tactics, so we can go through right now. But previous games that have come out on disinformation have covered things like trolling people, so deliberately provoking people to get an emotional reaction and provoking outrage. So a lot of mis and disinformation benefits from making people angry, because when people are angry, they don't stop and think about what they're hearing. um, they are more apt to share, to respond, so that these things generate a lot more engagement. Anger is the easiest emotion to make spread faster. Um, so as part of that, there's also exploiting emotional language. So trying to make people afraid or angry about a particular topic is a good way to the disinformation actors will try to steer a conversation in a certain way. Otherwise, artificially amplifying the reach and popularity of certain messages. So when I mentioned having 500 fake accounts, if I have all of those fake accounts like something, that's artificially amplifying the reach. Or another example is bots. So bots are software programs that are designed to perform certain activities. So that can be, creating a social media account and then posting every hour or so about a certain set of topics, or buying fake followers. Um, you can often see that happen. There are things like click farms, which is just, a person in a room with like 300 phones that are all liking certain content. Um, Creating and spreading conspiracy theories. So blaming small, secretive, and nefarious organization for ongoing events in the world. So we see that a lot. A lot of conspiracy theories are around on the internet. Conspiracy theories, it's something that is hundreds, if not thousands of years old. Um, and yeah, they sort of thrive on the fact that a lot of processes in our world are unknowable, that there are powerful people whose actions we don't exactly know. But that can be because we don't know exactly what they're doing, that's a convenient space for people who like to lie to just start talking about it and saying, "Ah, I know exactly what they're doing," even if they have no idea. So otherwise, polarizing audiences. So deliberately emphasizing and magnifying intergroup differences. So this is just something we see all the time, finding the fissure points where people disagree and really hammering in on it, as a way to polarize societies, but even just like groups. So, if I mention the tennis club group, um, oftentimes they'll, target people who have a specific interest and post sort of unrelated content and then sort of create fissure points based on the people who like that or don't like that. Um, Anyway, so games have previously covered this. So for example, trolling people, as far as, there are games where they have the player try to take this perspective of a disinformation campaign and mess with people as much as possible, by trolling, by trying to make other people very angry, by setting up social media bot accounts and creating conspiracy theories. So these games already exist, but what I will tell you is that most of this is about the rhetoric that you see in disinformation. So trolling, exploiting emotional language, and creating and spreading conspiracy theories and polarizing audiences, that's often about what they're saying. So what we're going to go over today is not just what they say, but more what they do and how they get their message out. So one thing I wanted to mention is another example of rhetorical advices. This is just one of honestly many games. So if you go to counteringdisinformation.org, there are a number of games you could check out. Um, so Bad News was with a group I was involved with, so I would definitely encourage you to check that one out. As far as games, this could be a whole other session, but the elements of it that are a game or not really depend. A lot of these are, I'm going to be honest, pretty simple. There's a limited set of options and you can click them. It's not like you have, grand theft misinformation. The mechanics in educational games tend to be pretty short. And from what I understand with this jam, um, yeah, the mechanics that you will be creating, don't need to be the most complex, in the world to get your point across. Certainly you can do a lot with text. Um, but anyway, so I would check out those games if you're looking at what's already been done and how people have approached this. Um, but yeah, from now on, I'm going to talk about more of the techniques that we've seen in sort of the real world. So the one of the points I want to drive across is that how a narrative or how a lie is spread can be just as important as what they're saying. So here we have a real newscaster, and here we have a fake account that is impersonating that newscaster. You often see that a lot with celebrities. Um, so as you can see, we have a picture of a guy that looks pretty similar. A lot of the information is quite similar. Um, this one has, 961 followers, where this one has 108. So that's pretty good for a fake account, as far as generating an audience that seems to believe that it's the same guy. Um, so yeah, we'll go through examples of how people are deceptive online. So one of them is inauthentic accounts. So that can be bots, like I told you about, those software programs that will perform, oftentimes repetitive tasks, trying to imitate real users. Cyborg accounts, that's when you have it's partially a software program running the account and partially a human being who, let's say the account is set to automatically post content every hour, and then you have a person who comes in, at 30 minutes and then puts something in as well. That would be sort of a cyborg, is how we think of that. Sock puppet is where they are. Sock puppet is like when you have a sock around your hand and you make it talk. This is where you have a fake identity and you're making it talk as if it was a real person. Another thing is anonymous accounts. So sometimes they don't even bother creating an identity for their fake person. They just stick with anonymity. Um, so when they're setting up these fake accounts, oftentimes they will have a fake picture. So these are from thispersondoesnotexist.com. Um, there are certain telltale signs you can see, but honestly, the technology is getting a lot better. With this particular software, it was really bad at doing both ears, and the eyes were always kind of in the same place. But the technology to create fake images has gotten a lot better, so it is a lot harder to find um, which images are real or not. But yeah, so they'll set up a fake account and they'll often try to make it look like a real person. So one way to do that is to take over an existing account. So instead of setting up an entirely new account and, having it interact with real people, try to make friends, you can acquire an existing account. So um, many disinformation campaigns will either buy old accounts or they will hack into accounts. And the advantage of that is that whatever friends that account has are still their friends. So they can take advantage of the network that that account has. So for example, during the pandemic, there was an official from the WHO who had their account hacked. And then that account was used to spread conspiracy theories about COVID. Um, so you can use the existing legitimacy that account has developed with its audience to spread disinformation, or that's what disinformation campaigns often do. So yeah, hacking is definitely a tool in their toolkits. Bots, so as I mentioned, fake accounts that automatically post content. So these are two bots. They have, hardly any followers. Um, One thing that was really funny about this was that the person who was making the account, they was making all of these bot accounts, had their bios be different sentences from the book Dracula. So they basically went through the whole book of Dracula and had accounts for each sentence. So that was how the researchers pieced together that this was the same person creating all these accounts. Is that they would have very random. I mean, this isn't even like a full sentence out of Dracula. Um, but anyway, they'll often have like a fake picture of someone and a software that runs to make it post content or do whatever activity it wants to be done. Okay. So another part is the creation of personas. So fake accounts often have like a fake history or background, or they're meant to look like a real person. So this is a Spanish language TV show on Telemundo called Reina de Corazones, and it has about almost 16,000 followers. And this account was taken over by um, a disinformation campaign, and they could take advantage of the history that that account already has. So, in one moment, that account is talking about the TV show, and in the next, it's getting very political or talking about subjects that are completely unrelated. But they might still talk about the TV show sometimes to make it seem like it's all connected as part of the same person. Um, so this is what's known as a persona, trying to come up with a history for what would make these accounts look legitimate. Another thing that, you know, users who are hacking into existing accounts can take advantage of is that these accounts are often kind of old. So if it's been around since 2017, that is more believable that it is a real person versus if I set up, 500 fake accounts tomorrow, um, then that history can't really be developed as well. Um, so anyway, all right, AI images. So that we have a lot of talk about AI images. Um, I'm sure you've seen some interesting deep fakes and AI generated content. I will say as of now, a lot of the AI images that we've been seeing are still spotted pretty easily. Like all of these look like a little cartoony. Um, there is work that people do to try to make AI images look more and more realistic, but the technology is getting better and better, and in the future, this is definitely something to look out for, um, as they're pretty cheap to make, and people who are not really paying attention can't really spot the signs. AI right now is really bad at hands. So the number of fingers on a hand can be distorted. They used to be bad at ears. They're a bit better at ears now. But there usually are like signs of, like physics that wouldn't happen in the real world. Um, but yeah, AI images are definitely becoming very popular. um, as our video. Another thing, this is a pretty small thing, but copy pasta. So copy pasta is just where a group will post the same materials in different places. So here we have the same video that is being copied by a number of different accounts. So part of that is that if you have one account that posts something that is false, that will be seen by some people, maybe, but will it be believed? So there's something called the illusory truth effect, which is that the more times that someone sees or hears something, the more likely they are to believe it. That has been confirmed through psychological research. So oftentimes these campaigns will have their message in different places. So they'll have a number of different accounts that are all saying the same message or similar messaging. They'll try to get on mainstream TV and have their online accounts posting the same messaging to try to take advantage of the fact that the more people hear the same idea, the more likely they are to believe that it is true. So copy pasta is a part of that, as is when these campaigns set up a number of different places to disseminate their message. So different accounts, sometimes they'll set up their own websites to share their content, all of that. So another thing, baiting influencers. So trying to get actually influential people to share your message. So that can be celebrities, journalists, local leaders who might not know that what you're spreading is disinformation. Um, so this happens a lot. Celebrities sort of amplifying content that comes from pretty unpopular accounts. As soon as a celebrity posts it, it's very popular. Um, so these sorts of disinformation campaigns will try to direct message influential people, or get their attention in some other way. Sometimes they just straight up pay influencers to spread their message. Um, so yeah. Otherwise, here's another one. This is a from a disinformation campaign where they were trying to message a journalist to say, "Would you like to cooperate?" Fortunately, their English was pretty bad, so the journalist was able to figure out that this was a disinformation campaign. Um, so another thing is cross-posting. So cross-posting is where you have the same content on different platforms. That's just another way to spread it. Disinformation campaigns will try to um, be seen by as many different on as many different outlets as possible to make their message both more popular and also contribute to that sort of illusory truth effect. So yeah, that's cross-posting. Localizing content. So oftentimes when we're talking about um, disinformation, oftentimes it's from people who are trying to, started by people who are trying to influence other people in different regions or countries or parts of the world. So a big part of that is they will try to use the local language, sometimes more successfully than other times. They'll try to blend in and talk about local news or, local events, things that people in that area care about so that they, can be viewed as being from that place. So yeah, here we have a sort of a Chinese account, um, and they are posting in Spanish, which is, not unheard of, but it does seem like there wasn't too much of an attempt to um, appear genuinely from a Spanish speaking place. So anyway, another thing is generating content unrelated to narratives. So an influence operation might mix legitimate content with their fake information. So we see this a lot. So accounts that are looking like real people or trying to look like real people, even if they're fake, they will, maybe start um, posting about a hobby or an interest of theirs that is unrelated to the disinformation narrative, but makes it so that they're more convincing to other people. Um, Other things that we see is like sometimes you'll have a fake website that is pretending to be a newspaper. So it'll be like um, I don't know, the Bratislava Times, right? So they're trying to say that they're a newspaper from Bratislava, and they will often steal news articles from other legitimate news sites, put it on their website, and mix it with the fake information so that when people go onto that website, they think that they are on a real website. Um, so that is also fairly common, to try to create a mixture of fake content and real content to mess with people. Another thing is impersonations of websites. So any website has source code, and that source code can be used to create a copy. So the things like the graphic design and the functions of the website can be recreated in a fake website. So this is a news outlet called Bloomberg. Um, but here is a fake news website called Bloomberg with a Q. One of the things that you cannot change is the URL. So you have to try to trick people with a URL that is somewhat similar, or at least disinformation campaigns will try to trick people. So they'll copy the source code, create a fake website, and then put in their own fake content. So they'll put in text that is about the whatever narrative they want to push. And sometimes these fake websites can be very sophisticated in that they will have the same buttons as the real website. So if I click on um, like or share, it will actually allow me to share this on social media. Or if I, click up here, there's a drop-down menu. If I click on any part of that, it would take me to the actual website. So I would never know I was on a fake website. So that can happen. That's a bit more of a sophisticated technique, but sometimes we see it and it's kind of terrifying. So that can be website impersonation. So this is another news outlet from Belgium that was impersonated. So as I mentioned, any part of this that you click on, when it was impersonated, it would go to the real website. So if I clicked on economy, it would take me to the actual website's economic section. Same with the share functions or the comment functions. Those all worked. Um, This is one of the Harvard University Belfer Center. So as you can see with all of these sort of impersonations, it's not just an impersonation of any website. Oftentimes they're going for very credible sources. So there are many people who take Harvard University very seriously. And if they thought that Harvard University was saying something, they would be likely to believe it. So with this fake website of that was impersonating Harvard, a lot of people got very confused and they started calling Harvard University to say, "Hey, is this true? Like we saw this website," and Harvard University was very confused because they were um, unaware that they had been impersonated. So they started investigating, and they found that there had been a faked website of their website put online. So that is a tactic that sometimes is used and is very sophisticated. Otherwise, so you might have screenshots of impersonated content. So you can have the federal German government was impersonated. Um, and then they put a screenshot of that so that nobody could tell that it was from the federal German government website. So, yeah, that was pretty bad. Otherwise, here's a news outlet that was impersonated. Um, so another thing that comes up is audio impersonation. So you can have people can create deep fake audio conversations. And this happened in the webs in Slovakia in the lead up to their presidential election. So they had a journalist talking to a politician, and there was no video. It was only audio. It was supposedly like audio that someone had recorded in the room. Um, but it was a clip where the politician was admitting to, I forget if it was like bribery or some other, very, very bad thing. Um, and the thing about this was that in Slovakia, there's a media moratorium in the 3 days before an election. So newspapers could not fact check this because newspapers were not allowed to talk about the election in 3 days before the election. So this deepfake became quite popular, and audio you can tell when something is deepfaked There are certain indicators in the actual like waveforms that are created of an AI voice. But for most people, you can't tell just listening to it. Audio impersonation has gotten very good, which is quite scary. Um, so this is sometimes used by disinformation campaigns because deepfake videos are very difficult to create very convincing versions of. And images can also be quite difficult to create convincingly. But audio seems to be um, both effective at getting people to believe it and fairly easy for people to create. So that's a very concerning thing that we've been seeing is deepfake audio. The last one is AI generated news sites. So um, these are sites that are completely created using artificial intelligence. So you tell ChatGPT to fill out articles for an entire website, and the entire website is called, like therealnews.com or something. So NewsGuard is a company that looks for these, and they found about 1,121 sites that were just completely fake. They were AI created, and there was no human oversight on what was being created. So anyway, those are roughly all of the tactics that I wanted to cover today. So I think we can leave the rest of it for questions. Um, yeah, because I know that was quite fast, but I hope that was interesting for you in terms of things you could put into your games to teach people about. Because a lot of these things are very concerning, but people don't necessarily know about them. So these are very good things for people to know about. So anyway.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was like incredibly informative. I feel like it's something that's definitely coming up a lot more with how prevalent AI is. It's so hard to even just go on, Facebook and be able to suss through what is real and what isn't real. And I'm noticing that a lot also across generations. I'm having to explain and having kind of like almost internet safety sessions with older generations because they are so much more susceptible to not being able to differentiate between what they're seeing online as real and fake. And I'm seeing that like on a very personal level. So globally, definitely a huge issue. So we do have a question. And again, if anybody has any questions, we do have a Q&A and feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat or in the question and answer box. So this attendee asks, where do you see the biggest opportunity for developers to create new games around disinformation?
Yeah, so what I would say in terms of development is, as I mentioned with previous games, a lot of the focus was on the rhetoric that disinformation campaigns used, but not necessarily these more complicated techniques that I was just telling you about with like bots or audio deepfakes. So I think a lot of that has not been covered in games as far as I know. So I think there is a lot of potential in that you can cover newer technologies. And video games are a great medium because you can have um, interactive features. So if you want to teach people about sort of the software that is used to analyze AI audio, you could have like, a game that is sort of a matching game of, match the waveform between a real audio and a fake audio or something like that. So I think there's a lot of potential in being able to teach people the real skills that they could use to discern as you mentioned, Jess, a lot of people are having trouble telling what's real and what's fake. And there are tools that can be used to tell what is real or fake. Um, so, there are like if you look up guides of like how to spot a bot account or how to identify a fake image or a fake audio or a deep fake, none of these are 100% effective. So like with ChatGPT and the text, there's all sorts of detectors. For the most part, these detectors are not effective. And with a lot of these different technologies, some of them work better than others. And but what I would say is you can teach people about the ones that are effective. And I think vi video games are a great medium to do that because you can have people actually go through the activity. Um, so yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We do have another question. What have you seen not work very well in games that tried to cover this topic and just didn't do a good job?
Yeah, I would say this topic is incredibly polarizing and people feel very strongly about this. What I would say is that some games have a very um, political agenda, so they don't like certain things that they're seeing online. What I would say is that's not really your job. Like you're not there to try to make people believe anything. Your job is just to teach people what is being done out there. So, I would say try to avoid putting yourself into um, the content too much and really try to just stick to um, what you 100% can know is, true or false. So like a lot of these technical things are um everybody agrees that setting up 500 accounts is deceptive and looks sketchy. You know what I mean? But in terms of the content of what these accounts are saying, that can get more complicated with what people believe. So I would encourage you to, and like, here's the thing, you do not have to follow my advice. You can do whatever you want. But what I would say is sometimes if you put too much of a message in it, it will get misinterpreted as like the whole field is like what could be more contentious and have people argue about more than like what is true. So just understand that the topic is very um, intense for a lot of people. So the more you can steer away from that debate, the better.
Thank you. The next question, I'm interested in hearing a little more about how generative AI is playing a role. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so as far as we know, generative AI is being used to create images of events that have never happened. Honestly, what I would say is that still by far, the main thing we see in terms of images and videos is wrong context. So, we see someone says, "Oh, this is the flood in Spain," and it's actually from like 5 years ago and a flood in an entirely different place. So even that, though that isn't the most like sophisticated technique, it's the video looks real because it is real. You don't have to create a generative content. So with images, we also see that a lot too, with like images from the wrong place at the wrong time, used incorrectly. Because what I would say with generative AI is that it still has some tells that people can identify. It's sometimes a bit cartoony. The hands don't work properly. The physics doesn't always work properly. I do think it's going to be a problem. But right now we still see a lot more like miscontextualized existing videos. Um, Otherwise, so that's more like images and videos. I would say audio is incredibly effective and scary. There have been at least two cases where there were um, people were trying to scam companies, and they would impersonate the voice of the CEO, and they would tell an employee to transfer out millions of, euros or dollars or, currency, um, out. And since it sounded, to the person, it sounded like that was the CEO, that was their boss, they might as well do this. And that was very successful. And it's a pretty simple technology. It's pretty easy for people to use, and it's quite scary. Um, so yeah, I would definitely say that's one to look out for as well.
Wonderful. The next question, are story games the best kind of games for teaching people about this?
It depends. It depends. So most of the games that I have seen um, have some element of story. So especially with the trolling, emotional language, creating conspiracy theories, and polarizing audiences, those are sometimes things that require a bit of context. They are not necessarily technical, but they require that you have a specific conspiracy theory or a reason why the player would be doing this, why they would be trolling or why they would be using emotional language. So that can benefit from a story, but you don't have to. So I would say something like, spot the audio deepfake based on the wave pattern is not necessarily so story based. I would say also, um, with educational games, one thing to keep in mind is your audience with a story game. So, um, different stories work for different people. The games that I was involved in making were very sarcastic and we tried to make them funny. I don't know if anyone did find them funny, but we tried our best. Um, and Yeah, but other games that I've seen are a bit more like in terms of tone, like innocent or definitely made for children directly. So I would just think about what your audience, who exactly you're trying to reach, and then you can build your story around that. So, sorry, long-winded answer. I think that you can do story games and you cannot do story games. It really just depends on what you want to teach people.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways of spreading disinformation that a narrative story is really effective, but also just a game of training people how to identify the difference between what's a AI photograph or video and what isn't, just
Yeah.
as effective. Um, okay, the next question. Hi, thanks for the presentation. Very informative. You're welcome. Glad you got a lot out of this presentation. Do you have any info on how the games and other interactive experiences perform overall to battle the disinfo? This doesn't really seem to be a popular genre, so to speak. What do you think is the worst covered part in educating people so far?
Yeah, so okay, so I would say with the games, so what you can do, a lot of the games were done by academics. And so they're, university professors or university professors working with game studios. And they would also create, videos or things for people to read. And you can sort of see how different forms of media work to affect people. Um, and I would say, the games were found to be effective and the videos were found to be effective. Um, but you can sort of see where. So the studies will show they did like pre and post surveys. So before somebody plays the game, they feel a certain way about, I don't know, trolling or disinformation, and afterwards they're better informed or they're ready for these tactics when they see them in real life. That was the foundation of the games we created, was sort of inoculation theory to get people ready for when they saw these things in real life. So there are measurable effects um, in terms of performance. But I think what you're also referring to is like popularity. So academics, love them. They're really curious. They're, great people. They're not oftentimes game developers, or the best at making something popular and cool. Um, so, what I would say is that in terms of popularity, uh, the rules that we always try to abide by is keep it short, um, keep it sort of punchy. So whether it's a video or a video game, um, respecting people's time. So making sure it's good quality content. Um, Yeah. So in terms of popularity, educational games in general are hard to make popular, because you're trying to do two things at once. Games, you're always trying to um, push the player, right? You're always trying to make it a little bit harder, test their skills, right? Make sure that they're constantly feeling challenged. Education, you're doing the same thing. You're trying to push them to learn. Okay, they've got the content now. Now we're going to learn a little bit more. That's going to be tough for them. And doing those two things of challenging them on a gameplay mechanics level and challenging them educationally is tough. So that's why we don't see a lot of, super popular educational games. I still think that can be possible. Like I grew up, playing educational games, typing to basically a version of asteroids where you would type out words. I still think there's a lot of potential in that genre. And also if you're looking to, create commercial projects that, I, as a kid, bought those games. They were fun. Um, so yeah, so sorry, last part of your question, what do you think is the worst covered part in educating people so far? I'd say if the tone is cringy. So if it's like, oh no, this person is lying about something, and I don't know, I've just seen sort of, I can't describe cringe exactly, but something where they don't think about the topic very intensely, because this is one of the most interesting topics in our time, but there's a lot of thorny questions. And if they try to present it as being too simplistic, so being like, oh no, person is lying, lying is bad, we're gonna go after person. There's just it's a more complicated field than that. So if you can convey the nuance that we sort of see with why people are trying to influence each other, um, what techniques they're using, I think you'll create a much more interesting game. So anyway, that's just my personal thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have something there with the cringe. There's something that feels pretty transparent about that, and it doesn't feel like it's getting the message across as effectively as it could be. And you actually answered what a little bit what my question would be is about how important it is to include aspects of this in educational games for kids. Because I too grew up. I mean, that was my first real video games for the most part was educational games, and how different the landscape is for those particular you know pieces and people what people are creating for kids now versus what was going on when I was growing up. It feels almost more important than ever to include that as some aspect in an educational game.
Totally, totally. And sort of the
Yeah.
last piece I would put on top of that is like always make sure you're respecting their intelligence. Like
Mm-hmm.
a game that's at the right level, um, shouldn't be talking down to the player. Like your players are smart, treat them like they're smart, and they'll respect you for it.
Definitely. Well, that was the last question in the Q&A. So I think it's a good time to wrap it up since we're nearing the end of the hour. Julian, thank you again so much for coming on and presenting all of this. I learned a lot from this. I hope anybody who's watching this learns a lot too that they can take into this game jam. And just as a reminder, this is a webinar that is within the United with Ukraine Ctrl+Alt+DIsinfo game jam. We will be emailing this to all of the participants after the webinar, but it will also be available on the United with Ukraine website. And I'll drop the links here in the chat for those who are live with us. And these webinars will be available on the resources page for you to review. Wonderful.
Cool.
Right.
Well, thanks for having me. Hope that was
Yeah,
helpful.
of course. I think it was. And we'll be having you back on December 10th for another webinar for being bad, applying inoculation to game design. It'll be the same time on December 10th. And you can sign up for that webinar on the website too. All right.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks.
And take care.